like to turn to our guest on Zoom. We have Professor Kobi Michael joining us, a senior research fellow at the INSS and Misgav Institute. You just heard those numbers, from that recent poll. Obviously, when I spoke to Palestinian analysts, they said that taking these polls amidst war is a bit unfair because it reflects the current feelings of the public. But I'm interested to hear what you have to say, because obviously the situation, we're looking at a very dire humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip. So it's only fair to assume that, we're seeing increased radicalization. But on the other hand, is there anger towards Hamas for what has happened? We've also heard Fatah come out and attack Hamas.
Good morning. I'm asking myself, reading the poll, what we haven't learned yet about the Palestinian society and the Palestinian leadership. One of the advantages that we have with Professor Kirtchuk polls is the perspective of time and the idea that he asks in every quarter the same questions. So we have the ability to compare between the figures, between the findings. And the idea that the vast majority of the Palestinian society still supports the massacre of October 7th and finding it justified. And the idea that the vast majority of the Palestinian constituency still supports Hamas and wants to see Hamas continue ruling the Gaza Strip. The idea that Yahya Sinwar became to be not less than Salah ad-Din. I think that all of these findings actually indicate that Hamas is so deeply embedded in the Palestinian society. And talking about the Palestinian collective, we are talking about the Hamas Palestinian collective. It is right that there are some individuals who do not support Hamas and maybe can be considered as innocent people. But generally speaking, and talking about the Palestinian collective, we are talking about Hamas collective. And this is the situation. And I think that all the findings eventually indicate about the very ill psychological infrastructure of the entire Palestinian society, be it Hamas, be it Fatah, be it the Palestinian Authority, you name it. So I think that the findings are very concerning in this regard, and I think that we have to open our eyes and to understand with whom actually we have to deal.
I just, and Ariel, I'd like to hear from you as well, but I'd just like to say, Israel's stated goal in this continued war in the Gaza Strip against Hamas is to root out Hamas and its military capabilities. But again, rooting out the ideology is a totally different issue in of itself. And one would think that when you're seeing this mass devastation across the Gaza Strip, that, the ongoing war would actually increase radicalization. What is your take on that?
Yeah, so one of the calls by Prime Minister Netanyahu was not only the demilitarization of the Gaza Strip, but also the de-radicalization, to uproot these radical elements or radical influences. But if we look deep into the numbers of these Khalil Shkaki polls, we see that, in fact, the support for Hamas attacks is higher in the West Bank rather than in Gaza, where Hamas controls, and the population that is suffering from the repercussions of Hamas's attack. Just if you mentioned the December poll, so 82% of West Bank residents said that given the results of the October 7th attack, the decision to carry it out was correct. But among Gaza residents, only 57% believe that. And that's because they're suffering the repercussions. So if the residents of the West Bank, the Palestinians there, they're not seeing or feeling the heavy bombardment of the IDF in Gaza, so they feel like just simply someone's representing them, someone's fighting for them, and it's worth it. But if they were to feel the repercussions of that, I think their opinions would change, as is the case for Gaza residents right now suffering over 5 months of an Israeli retaliation to an attack carried out by Hamas.
Right, but what West Bank Palestinians have to say in these polls, is essential ultimately, because when we're looking at a future of what's going to happen post-war and the leadership that's going to take over, there seems to be very, very limited support for Mahmoud Abbas. Obviously, we've seen the appointment of a new prime minister, which Hamas has targeted and has said is, essentially unfair because there should be free democratic elections, although we know that Hamas did not allow that to happen in 2007 in its military coup in the Gaza Strip. But Kobi, I'm interested to kind of hear what your take is in terms of what we can expect out of the West Bank in the future, especially amid the strikes that we saw in Jenin yesterday, the ongoing military raids in different communities, and the Muslim holy month of Ramadan.
In the West Bank, we are in a terror war since March or May 22, a war that was intensified since October 7th, of course. And there is a hand that shakes the cradle there. The Iranians are doing huge effort in order to ignite the entire West Bank and providing them with more money and with more weapons. And Hamas, of course, does the utmost efforts in order to keep the West Bank in such a situation. And we have a very paralyzed Palestinian Authority. So at the end of the day, the IDF and the General Security Services are doing all the work for the sake of the Israelis, as well as for the sake of the stability and the survival of the Palestinian Authority. I think that the situation in the West Bank is very concerning, but the huge advantage that we have there is that we are with boots on the ground and we have very good intelligence. We have a full freedom of action, and therefore we are able to mow the grass on a daily basis. And this is exactly what we do there. But we don't have to be confused. We are in a war in the West Bank as well. And we have to remember that this is the situation. And just the last remark, going back to the Khalil Shkaki polls, we have to remember that in this poll, 80% of the people in the Gaza Strip stated that one or more of their relatives were wounded or killed in the war in Gaza. What does it mean? It means that almost everybody belongs in this way or another to Hamas. So I think that this is something that we have to take into consideration as well.